Today's goal is 100 berries. You know the drill, smash that button to get that juicy fruit and hit subscribe for more amazing recaps. Now let's get into it. Father, may I speak with the cannon operators for a bit? I'd like to confirm a few things. The king, feeling suspicious, thought, what kind of trick is this boy up to now? The scene shifts to the soldiers lined up, cannons ready, and as the crown prince arrives, they all bow deeply. Greetings, your highness. The crown prince Hyung gives a gracious nod, saying, thanks to your efforts, our nation enjoys peace. I am deeply grateful to each of you. The soldiers murmur humbly, your highness is too kind. But as he looks over them, Hyung's eyes narrow slightly, noticing something odd. Wait, why does everyone's armor look different? Curious, he raises a hand. Did you all prepare your own armor? The soldiers respond in unison, yes, your highness. Hyung nods slowly to himself, so that explains it. These guys had to bring their own armor. Makes sense though, I suppose. It's the time of Roshan after all. With a small shake of his head, he sets the armor issue aside for later and focuses back on the task at hand. Are all the cannons and handhelds here? He asks. General Choi steps forward and pulls a tarp aside, revealing an array of weapons lined up in an impressive display. Swords, spears, and cannons stacked neatly. Hyung's face lights up with genuine excitement. Wow, I didn't expect to see this with my own eyes. The color is beautiful. Choi looks at him, confused, wondering, what is his highness so thrilled about? But Hyung's already stepped forward, examining the weapons with a keen eye. As he looks closer, he realizes they're still using wooden cannons without braces or stoppers to maximize the gunpowder's blast. He mutters to himself, yeah, it'll be quite a while before cannons with braces become the norm. It makes sense they're still using standard handheld cannons. Then something else catches his eye. He turns to Choi and points, is that cannon made of wood with braces? Choi nods dutifully, yes, your highness. Hyung strokes his chin thoughtfully, looking like an old scholar deep in thought. We're making improvements, but honestly, a full upgrade is long overdue. The question is, where do we even start? Deciding to save the cannons for later, he shifts his attention to the handhelds, peppering General Choi with rapid-fire questions. How effective are these handhelds, General? What kind of armor does the Jurchen army use? General Choi replies, yes, your highness. There are different levels of armor, but they typically wear either light or heavy armor. Hyung keeps the questions coming. And if they're in light armor and get hit by one of these handhelds, what happens? Choi looks thoughtful. I haven't witnessed it myself, but reports from the north say a Jurchen soldier was struck down at around 50 meters. Hyung nods, satisfied. Got it. I've seen enough here, let's head back. As they walk, Hyung's mind is spinning with thoughts. There's a lot to consider here, but where should I start? After the drill, he turns to the soldiers and generals, offering a warm smile. You all did excellent work today. I've arranged food and drink, please. Enjoy yourselves. The soldiers cheer. Long live His Highness. Thank you, Your Highness. But Hyung, even as he watches them celebrate, can't shake his nagging curiosity. He suddenly blurts out, this isn't right. I'm too curious, I need answers. Without hesitation, he calls over 2 soldiers from the artillery team. They exchange nervous glances before replying, yes, Your Highness? Hyung's grin turns mischievous. Follow me. I have a few questions for you. But before he dives into his interrogation, he says, sorry for keeping you from the feast. The soldiers quickly wave it off, saying, no need to apologize, Your Highness. Relieved, Hyung jumps in. Great. So tell me, when you use these handheld cannons, do you experience any issues? Is it uncomfortable? Or is there something difficult about using them? Please, don't hold back. One soldier steps forward, scratching his head. It's not uncomfortable exactly, but it does have its issues. Hyung raises an eyebrow, intrigued. Oh, like what? The soldier explains, well, the handheld cannon needs to be mounted on a pole to fire, but even the strongest artillerymen can barely fire 2 shots. Range and accuracy are also a problem. Close up, they work fine, but from a distance, well, it's a bit of a gamble. Hyung nods, thinking deeply, then asks, may I hold it? He picks up the cannon pole, feeling its weight and the way it tilts forward. So the center of gravity leans forward. Is that just because it's so heavy? Curious, he asks, How heavy is this handheld cannon? Choi responds, 3 gons and 8 reals, Your Highness. Hyung continues, and the length? Choi hesitates slightly. They vary, but the shortest is about 4 feet. Hearing this, Hyung's eyes widen. Wait, no standardized measurements? That's like having rulers of different lengths. Choi explains sheepishly, they're tribute items, Your Highness. Hyung sighs heavily, realizing it's not just a matter of weight, but a whole system problem. And how much gunpowder does each cannon use? Choi's answer leaves him momentarily speechless. Hyung mutters, that much gunpowder? I think I need a doctor. Seeing his reaction, Choi looks concerned. Are you all right, Your Highness? Hyung waves it off. Fine, just surprised. With his questions answered, he nods. Thank you, General. Well done, everyone. The soldiers watch him leave, still puzzled. What's he so curious about? Isn't he just a kid? As they walk back, Hyung turns to Choi. General, do these handheld cannons require 2 people to fire? Choi nods. Typically, yes, Your Highness. Hyung presses. But isn't it possible for one person to handle it alone? Choi explains. It can be done, but it's complicated. The men have to tuck it under their arm or use their right hand while lighting the fuse with their left. Hyung sighs. That sounds incredibly inconvenient. Choi agrees. That's why we normally use 2 men, but it does drain our manpower. Nodding thoughtfully, Hyung says, let's focus on the handheld cannons first. He recalls his previous life as Kim Jin-ho in the US, where he'd seen his friend's private firearm collection, amazed at the power of even a small bullet propelled by a few grams of gunpowder. Back in Ozen, he thinks black powder isn't as powerful as modern smokeless powder, but it should still pack a punch. He mutters, should I make a sighting device? But can they even handle the recoil? Suddenly inspired, Hyung flings open the door, shouting, that's it, start small and build up. He quickly informs the eunuch, I'm heading to the Ministry of War. Upon arrival, he finds General Choi in a strange position, balancing in a squat while reading. Is he reading while doing squats? Startled, Choi jumps up. Your Highness, I wasn't expecting you so soon. Waving it off, Hyung says, no worries, just a quick question. He coughs theatrically. General, is the thickness of the cannon fuse standardized? Choi nods. Yes, Your Highness. Hyung asks to see one, and after a moment's hesitation, Choi lights it for him. The fuse sputters out immediately. Hyung raises an eyebrow. Can I see a few more? Choi, catching on, looks worried. Is there an issue, Your Highness? Hyung nods. Yes, General. The fuse can't withstand the wind, right? Choi sighs. You're right, but they just relight it. Hyung challenges. But in battle, can they afford that delay? He orders, General, send word to standardize the fuse length time is life out there. Impressed, Choi marvels. How does he think of these things? Elsewhere, the Minister of Revenue bumps into Lee Chan, and as they walk, he asks, I haven't seen the Crown Prince around. What's he up to? Lee Chan replies, he's been tied up with a very important experiment in the Research Institute for the last 5 days. Not long ago, he even requested mercury from the Military Supply Department. The Minister of Revenue, eyes widening in shock, sputtered, Mercury? Why would he need mercury? Scene shifts to the Crown Prince. Hyung had summoned the ministers for a discussion. It's been a while since we last met, he began, then addressed the Minister of Public Works directly. How's the progress on modifying the calendar? The minister replied, positive progress, Your Highness. We've identified discrepancies between our calendar and the Ming dynasties, and we're working on adjustments. Hearing this, Hyung felt some relief but pressed. Good. So when can we expect results? The minister answered, it should be ready by winter, Your Highness. At the word winter, Hyung's face clouded. That's too slow, he barked. The latest this should be completed is by the Mid-Autumn Festival. The Minister of Public Works was taken aback, thinking it impossible to meet the deadline. Hyung, visibly tense, continued, I've already told you use my name to urge them. Mid-Autumn Festival. No exceptions. Bowing, the minister replied quietly, understood, Your Highness. Hyung then turned to Generals Choi Hai-san and Lee Chan. I have a very important task for you both. Both generals, already sweating, cautiously asked, What is it, Your Highness? Wait a moment. Hyang retrieved a scroll and unfurled it to reveal an intricate firearm design. He grinned confidently. With this, the battlefield will be completely different in the future. Li Chan's eyes widened at the design, while the other ministers stared in shock. Then, turning to both generals, he added, "Let's work together to bring this weapon into reality." Both generals hesitated, clearly deep in thought. Minister Ian Su, having some doubts, asked, "In this drawing, if you pull the ring at the bottom, it seems that the curved part at the top would move. So how would the fuse ignite?" Rather than directly answering, Hyang asked Minister Zhang, "If it were you, how would you solve this?" Zhang thoughtfully replied, "If it were me, I'd tie the fuse to this spot here and place gunpowder on a plate here. When we pull the crescent-shaped part, the tied fuse would ignite the gunpowder, sending the flame down the barrel boom." Impressed, Hyang nodded. "Minister Zhang, your insight is remarkable." Now, Li Chan understood the design as well, and General Choi added, "It truly is brilliant. We'd no longer need an extra person to light the fuse, reducing the firing time significantly." Pleased, Hyang continued, "Exactly." He smiled, knowing they now grasped the process. Still pondering, Minister Zhang pointed out, "But, Your Highness, in this drawing, there's no fuse or gunpowder plate, just a protrusion here. How will the gunpowder ignite?" Chuckling, Hyang explained, "Allow me to clarify. According to the Westerners, this part here, shaped like a rooster's head, is called the cock-the-firing mechanism. They call this section the prison, where the gunpowder cap sits." Minister Zhang nodded. "Ah, so you just move the trigger to strike the cap?" "Exactly," Hyang replied. "When it strikes the cap, ignition will happen instantly." At that moment, General Choi raised another concern. "But Your Highness, our current gunpowder has serious issues. Producing it is dangerous, storage is tricky, and if the ingredients rub against each other, they could explode. The army mixes sand into it to prevent moisture absorption. With the moisture sensitivity, I'm concerned about using the cap you mentioned." Hyang replied confidently, "General Choi, your concerns are valid, but I have something that should solve these issues." He pulled out a bag of powder, the contents unknown to the ministers. "This," Hyang announced, "is my own creation silver powder." "Silver powder?" asked Minister Jiang, confused. "Does it contain real silver?" With a dramatic flair, Hyang sprinkled some of the powder onto a piece of paper, imitating a modern-day flourish. "No, not silver. It's a blend of saltpeter, mercury, and alcohol." He handed Deng Ig a hammer, smirking. "Judging by that look on your face, you're curious. Wanna give it a strike?" Deng Ig took the hammer and, puzzled, struck the paper covered in the powder. A second later, smoke burst from the paper, making him leap back, shouting, "Oh my God!" Hyang then turned to General Choi and Minister Li, asking, "What do you think?" Overjoyed, General Choi exclaimed, "With this, we can absolutely use it. But how did you even think of such a thing, Your Highness?" Hyang laughed, hugging the general. "What can I say? I'm just that clever." Turning serious, he added, "This is only a sample. For practical use, we'll position it here. What do you think?" General Choi hesitated before asking, "Could I try holding it, Your Highness?" "Of course." Choi held the gun, carefully aiming. "Is this correct, Your Highness?" Watching, the other ministers admired him, one of them remarking, "General Choi looks incredible. So stylish." Hyang chuckled to himself, amused. "These old men." Li Jian then offered his opinion. "If we use this weapon, the system of firing multiple rounds won't be practical anymore. A single-shot approach would be best." The Minister of Public Works raised a question. "But Your Highness, wouldn't single shot make it hard to hit the target?" Minister Zhang took the gun and examined it. "This protrusion seems like a sight for aiming, and the gun's length would help accuracy. I get it now. But the design intrigues me. This gun isn't cast, is it?" "That's right," Hyang replied. "It'll be forged, not cast. So notify the military supply department in advance." A full day passed as Hyang and the ministers discussed the gun's construction until late into the night. Scene shifts to the palace, where the king, deep in thought, asked his eunuch, "I haven't seen the crown prince around lately. What's he up to?" "Your Highness, he's just arrived." As Hyang entered, the ministers muttered, "Speak of the devil," and he appears. Politely, Hyang greeted his father. "I hope you're well, Your Majesty. I haven't seen you around. What have you been doing?" asked the king. "I was just about to report my current research," Hyang replied. The eunuch presented a book, which Hyang introduced as a report on the achievements of the Institute of Science and Technological Development. The king scanned the pages, astonished. "Is this all true?" "Yes, father. Every word." Shocked, the king exclaimed, "You've developed a method to adjust the Ming dynasty calendar for Rosen?" "Yes, Your Majesty." Hyang continued, "Remember the timing mishap during the Gucci Cree ritual a few years ago?" The king nodded. "Yes, a 15-minute delay. The eclipse prediction was off." Hyang explained, "That incident happened because the Ming calendar didn't align with Rosen's. We needed a suitable adjustment formula." After reading further, the king asked, "And this astronomical observation tool, what is it?" "It observes celestial events, just as the name suggests." Confused, the Minister of Revenue muttered, "I don't understand any of this." Hyang, slightly disappointed, replied cheerfully, "I'll submit a detailed report on it later, Your Majesty." The king paused, deep in thought. This kid, even considering relations with the Ming dynasty, observing celestial bodies could indeed complicate their relations, thought Hyang. "Instead of an independent calendar, I propose adjusting our lunar calendar based on Ming methods," he suggested. "When this is sorted, we'll discuss it further," replied the king. Hyang bowed, hiding his disappointment. "Yes, father." Curious about the lack of military updates, the king asked, "Crown Prince, I see no report on military matters." Hesitant, Hyang replied, "That research is being conducted under strict secrecy. We need more time, Your Majesty." The Minister of Revenue thought, "What on earth are they working on?" Then Hyang said something that made the king furious. "Although we're behind schedule, we'd like to request additional funds." Barely containing his anger, the king said, "Show me results first, then maybe." Late at night in the king's chambers, still restless, he thought, "Should I wait for Hing's report or visit him now?" Just then, the eunuch entered. "The crown prince has arrived. Let him in." The king's gaze sharpened. "Let him in immediately." As Hyang entered, the king leaned forward, asking gently, "Why so late?" Hyang, fully aware of his father's curiosity, respectfully replied, "Forgive me for coming at such a late hour, father. I don't have much to report, but I do have one request. I need military officers and soldiers from the training unit." A few days later, the requested officers and soldiers were discreetly assigned to the Research Institute, their lips sealed about the work. Once they arrived, they were quickly moved to a secured location, surrounded by fences and guarded with the highest level of security. Each day, loud explosions rumbled from within. At the entrance, Hyang had boldly placed a sign, Area 51. The king, unfamiliar with the term, didn't catch the reference to the Modern World U.S. research facility. One of the ministers muttered, "I'm not sure what Area 51 is, Your Majesty, but since that sign went up, a new phrase has started catching on. Game changer." Puzzled, the king asked, "Game changer? What does that mean?" The minister shrugged. "I'm not quite sure, Your Majesty, but I hear it's a Western expression," one minister muttered, looking puzzled. Since the establishment of Area 51, Hing's routine had transformed entirely. He'd started rising at the crack of dawn, around 6 or 7, and after completing his morning duties as Crown Prince, he'd head directly to the Military Supply Department's Research Institute. During this period, Hyang was so busy that he'd even taken to riding a horse through the streets, cutting down travel time and creating quite a spectacle. Seeing the Crown Prince galloping by had become something of a new attraction in Hanyang, and his busy, focused expression left passers-by both curious and mystified. Two officials caught sight of Hyang riding past and exchanged glances. What on earth could the Crown Prince be working on that's so pressing? One wondered aloud. Back at court, the concern had only grown. The Minister of Revenue, looking uneasy, addressed the king. "Your Majesty, I fear we can't delay any longer. We must investigate what the Crown Prince is working on." Another minister quickly added, "Yes, we have to make sure the budget is being used appropriately." The king, sharing their unease, looked around the room. "Does everyone agree?" The ministers nodded, and the king sighed. "I've been thinking the same." He straightened and ordered, "Summon the crown prince immediately." "Yes, your majesty," replied the chief official, bowing as he turned to carry out the command. When Hyang appeared before his father, he bowed respectfully. "Father, please forgive me," he began. "The matter I'm working on concerns the national security of Ozen. That's why I have no choice but to keep it secret until we achieve results. It's a top-secret issue." The king considered his words, then replied, "I understand, but however confidential it may be, I can't allocate further funds without a report." Two ministers exchanged startled glances. Was the king really demanding an investigation? Noticing Hyang's concerned expression, the king softened. "I'll give you time to prepare. How much time do you need?" Hyang took a deep breath, realizing he had no other choice now. 5 days, father. I only need 5 days." The king agreed with a nod. "Very well. In 5 days, we will inspect the research institute." Scene shifts to 5 days later. On the appointed day, all the ministers and officials gathered in front of the research institute, anxiously awaiting the king's arrival. As soon as he stepped out, they all bowed in unison. Hyang greeted him with a broad smile. "Father, you're here." The king replied, "Yes, I am. It seems the research has expanded significantly. There are a lot more officials now, but they don't look too well. Everyone seems exhausted. Or am I imagining things?" "Father, you must be mistaken," Hyang quickly responded. "Let's head inside." As they entered, the king's eyes widened at the display of strange items. He turned to Hyang, confused. "Aren't these the creations of Minister Zhang? Why do they look so small?" Hyang chuckled. "Those are just display models. They don't actually function." The king, still puzzled, asked, "Is that all? This doesn't seem to match the budget that was spent." With a mischievous glint in his eye, Hyang dashed over to a door leading to a hidden room. Before opening it, he called out, "Father, that was only the beginning. The real results are right in here." The door creaked open, revealing a room lined with shelves displaying various unfamiliar objects. The king's eyes lit up. Stepping inside, he excitedly asked, "What are these things?" "Let's go in quickly." But Hyang gently tugged on his father's sleeve. "Father, what you're about to see is highly classified. Except for you and the ministers, all other officials must remain outside." The king nodded, understanding, and instructed the other officials to wait as he and the ministers entered. Inside, the king looked around in astonishment and asked Yun and the ministers, "Did you and the team at the Research Institute create all of this?" Hyang quickly answered, "Yes, father. They've worked very hard." The king smiled, impressed. "I see. Well done, all of you." He then picked up a curious tool and asked, "What is this long rod for?" "That," Hyang replied, "is a leveler. It's used to measure balance horizontally and vertically." He added, "But it's still a prototype. If the iron ball lands precisely in the center, that means everything is perfectly level." The king examined the tool closely. "I see. But why is such accuracy necessary?" "It's essential for construction, father," Hyang explained. The king looked surprised. "Construction? Tell me more." "Yes," Hyang continued. "It's crucial for assembling astronomical instruments. The surface must be perfectly level to get accurate measurements." The king nodded thoughtfully. "I understand. So, this tool could also be useful for building government structures, right?" Hyang replied cautiously, "Please forgive me, father, but it's still too early to use it for that purpose. The leveler is still experimental. When it's ready, I'll submit a full report." The king nodded, satisfied. "I'll await your report." Then he picked up a model of a ship, examining it with interest. "Is this a model of a battleship?" "Yes, father," Hyang replied. "It's a scaled model of the largest battleship." The king looked closely and frowned. "This ship looks odd. It doesn't resemble any Ozen design." "That's because it's modeled after a Western ship, father, built to the same scale as their largest warship." The king, holding the model, looked amazed. "What? The Westerners have built a ship this enormous?" He looked closer. "What about the oars?" Hyang laughed. "That ship doesn't need oars, father. It runs entirely on wind power." The king, now holding another model, asked, "And what about its weapons?" "It's armed with cannons, father," Hyang answered. "It could carry up to 80. The king looked stunned. 80 cannons? Incredible. He turned to his son, proud. "Crown Prince, you continue to amaze me." Hyung, delighted, replied, "I will make you proud, father." The ministers nearby looked equally awestruck. Just then, the king noticed a simpler model beside the warship. "What's this one? Is it a bowl of noodles?" Hyung burst into laughter. "No, father. It represents an iron ship." The king and ministers gasped. An iron ship? Months before, Hyung had first mentioned his ambition to build an iron ship, and the ministers had been just as astonished. They'd asked, "An iron ship? That's impossible. Everyone knows iron sinks in water." But Hyung had replied confidently, "It's not impossible. We simply haven't found the right way." Curious, they'd asked him to explain further. Hyung had called for the eunuch. "Bring me a bronze cup and a large basin of water." The eunuch returned, "Yes, your highness," placing the items before him. Conducting a simple experiment for the officials, Hyung demonstrated. "See? Even iron can float on water." He explained, "If the object is solid and touches the water with a small surface, it will sink. But if it's hollow with enough surface contact, it can float. In other words, if we keep the mass the same but increase the volume, the density decreases." One of the ministers, stroking his beard, asked, "What's density?" The Minister of Public Works, standing nearby, chimed in, "We learned about this at the Foundational Institute. If we use thin, strong iron sheets and attach them together, we could build an iron ship." Hyung nodded. "Exactly. It's that simple." However, another minister raised a concern. "But how do we securely join the iron sheets while ensuring water doesn't seep through?" Smiling innocently, Hyung replied, "That's your research task. I leave it to you." The ministers silently despaired, wondering if they should just resign. Later, Hyung explained to the king why the wooden model was there. The Minister of Revenue respectfully said, "Your Majesty, I don't think building an iron ship will be easy." The king asked, "But do you think we can find a way?" Confidently, Hyung replied, "Of course. We already know the principle. Now we just need to figure out the method." The minister continued, "But, Crown Prince, the issue is that we don't know how long this will take." King Taejang then asked, "Will I see an iron ship while I'm still on the throne?" At this, Hyung hesitated but replied, "Not only might father not see it, but I might not see it during my reign either." Shocked, the king exclaimed, "What? Even so, do you still think we should pursue this research, despite not knowing the time or resources it will require?" Filled with confidence, Hyung replied, "For the future of Yotian, we must. Father, please trust me." Taken aback by Hyung's resolve, the king and ministers could only comment, "This boy has conviction." One minister added, "But everything strange he's done so far has yielded good results." The king sighed, "All right, continue. But we can't just pour time and money into this blindly. You'll need to submit a detailed plan and provide periodic progress reports." Smiling, Hyung responded, "Yes, father." As the king examined more models, he asked, "I've been wondering, what's that odd thing in the corner?" "Oh, that's Heron's steam ball, father," Hyung replied. "A steam ball? It looks like this?" The king asked, surprised. Hyung explained, "It's a measuring device created by a famous Western scholar long ago." The king then added, "Even if we manage to build an iron ship, there's another issue. The heavier the ship, the harder it'll be to move with just sails and oars. How will we make it move?" The minister nodded. "That's another challenge." Full of excitement, Hyung replied, "Of course, Yong Shin would have thought of that already. I've also considered it, which is why I want to start a new research project with all of you ministers." Calling for the eunuch, he instructed, "Bring the device I requested from the military supply department." The eunuch obediently replied, "Yes, your highness," and brought out a spinning device. Seeing it, the ministers were amazed. "It's spinning like a wheel and speeding up." Hyung asked, "Have you ever seen how a pot lid moves when rice is cooking? The energy from the water and fire can move even that heavy lid. I'd like to call this a steam engine." As the model steam engine ran, the ministers were astonished by how quickly it spun, like a whirlwind. The Minister of Public Works exclaimed, "With just a little water and fire, it spins like that. This is worth researching. If perfected, we could use it for ships, making them less reliant on wind and requiring fewer rowers." Hyung waved his hand, saying, "This isn't just for ships. Confused, Minister Li Zhan asked, "You mean it has other uses?" Hyung quickly responded, "What if we used it instead of horses for carriages?" The Minister of Public Works and Li Zhan were stunned at the thought of replacing horse-drawn carriages with a steam engine. Scene shifts to King Taejang as Hyung presents his invention. "You want to use this to pull a cart?" "I don't understand," the king said. Hyung asked, "What part confuses you, father?" The king expressed his concerns. "To use this, we'll need to constantly supply it with water and fire, right? If so, we'd need to carry a large amount of both on the cart, leaving no room for cargo." Thinking to himself, Hyung noted the king's sharpness but outwardly responded calmly. "I understand, father, but this steam engine generates significant power for its size. It could pull more than just one cart." Still skeptical, the king asked, "Many carts? Is that even possible?" With a confident smile, Hyung replied, "Let me show you, father." He eagerly opened the door to the secret room. The king and ministers were awestruck, exclaiming, "What are all these things?" Hyung thought, "This is my 21st century passion, the model railroad." He then said, "Allow me to demonstrate the steam engine's capability." He ordered the eunuch to prepare the steam-powered locomotive. At first, the king was puzzled. "You attached a steam engine to wheels?" Lighting the fire confidently, Hyung replied, "All right, let's start the demonstration." He added coal to the furnace, and as steam built up, the ministers held their breath, waiting. Soon, the model train began moving along the tracks. Overjoyed, the king celebrated, "It's moving! It's really working!" Hyung smiled and said, "This is just a model, but I'll do my best to apply it in real life. If successful, we could travel from Hanyang to Busan in a day, reaching the farthest corners of Joseon in a single day. The heartbeat of Joseon will be revived." Still amazed, the king asked, "What do you mean by reviving the heartbeat of Joseon?" Hyung explained, "Currently, due to mountainous terrain, people are stuck where they're born, living and dying on the same land. But with cross-country trains, we'd usher in a new era, bringing benefits to everyone." In awe, Ministers Kim Young and Mensa Young remarked, "It sounds like a dream." The king, however, remained contemplative. Hyung observed his father's expression, noting the promise of success and the significant resources required. Acknowledging this, Hyung requested the Minister of Public Works to present the development plan. The minister and another official retrieved a large stack of plans and placed them on the table. King Taejang could barely believe his eyes. It was an enormous pile of documents. Opening the first one, he found a comprehensive development strategy for the entire country, with so many details it made his head spin. He muttered, "I hate cool pens. These are strategic plans to strengthen Joseon, considering geography, economic conditions, population, and resources," Hyung explained. Overwhelmed, the king counted silently, realizing there were 42 volumes in total. He remarked, "Well, they're worth reading," then ordered the left prime minister to review them with other ministers. Afterward, Hyung made another request. "Father, I have one more petition. The research institute is severely understaffed. None of us are getting enough rest." Intrigued, the king asked the Minister of Public Works to verify. Near tears, the minister replied, "The Crown Prince is managing multiple projects. There's too much work, too few people, and barely any time for rest." The king, still curious, asked, "Can't you find more people?" The minister responded, "Rumors of the heavy workload have spread, so no one dares join. Initially, many came for potential promotions, but every new project adds to the workload. In just 6 months, we've created so much yet are overwhelmed." The king, frowning, seemed ready to scold but then smiled and said, "Hyung, you're quite diligent." Grinning, Hyung replied, "Father, you are truly wise." Now understanding the situation, the king promised, "I'll help resolve the staffing issue, but since this research demands substantial funds, we must discuss it seriously." Hyung, a bit downcast, replied, "I understand, father." The king then added, "It seems you haven't shown me everything. I've already allocated a significant budget to the institute, so this can't be all." Noticing his father's look, Hyung immediately understood. As expected from father, Hyung thought. The king, with a hint of intrigue, suggested, "Shall we go check it out?" Referring, of course, to Area 51. Early in the morning, The king and Hyang rode their horses together within the palace grounds. Riding together like this is quite nice, don't you think? The king said. Hyang responded cheerfully, I think so too, father. After a while, the king curiously asked, what does Area 51 even mean? Realizing the question caught him off guard. Hyang chuckled and replied, oh, it's nothing important. It just has a nice ring to it. He laughed a bit awkwardly, which made the king raise a puzzled eyebrow, though he didn't press further. When they arrived at the entrance, the king remarked, it seems we're here. Yes, father, Hyang confirmed as they neared the gate. 2 guards halted them, loudly commanding, halt! Only those with proper authorization may enter. Present your token. The king, caught off guard, replied, what? How insolent! Hyang quickly intervened. Father, even I can't enter without a token. Security here is paramount, so please don't take offense. He then produced a token marked with a yin-yang symbol. Upon seeing it, the guard saluted and stepped aside, calling out, permission granted. The king watched in bewilderment, thinking, what kind of protocol is this? Once they had passed security, they continued riding. Observing the strict measures, the king remarked, Hyang, you seem to take security here very seriously. Hyang responded, it's essential to prevent secrets from slipping out, father. The king thought to himself, what exactly is he working on here that needs such precautions? At the entrance to the display area, they were greeted by General Choi Hai-san and the chief steward, who stood at attention and saluted. The king noted this posture is different from before, but very formal. General Choi Hai-san bowed politely and said, thank you, your majesty. Everyone has worked diligently. Noticing that the soldiers' uniforms looked distinctive, the king grew more curious. What exactly is the main work conducted here? He asked. General Choi replied respectfully, we are focused on enhancing and developing explosives, your majesty. Additionally, we're working on advancing cannons and firearms, creating new weaponry, and refining military strategies. In short, all military-related research happens here. Nodding, the king said, I understand. Growing eager, he continued, I'd like to see what you've been working on. General, would you lead the way? General Hai-san gestured forward. This way, your majesty, he said, adding, from here on, we must continue on foot. He then requested the guards to open the gate for the king's entry. The king wondered to himself, what lies beyond this gate that warrants such stringent measures? General Choi led the king and Hyang into a large open area filled with military defense equipment. Astonished, the king exclaimed, what is this? Isn't that gunpowder? Yes, your majesty, General Hai-san responded. We've developed a new type of gunpowder, much stronger than what Joseon currently uses. Stroking his beard thoughtfully, the king listened as General Choi requested permission to explain and led him to inspect the weapons more closely. As they walked, General Choi began, this powder, resembling dirt in color, is our original gunpowder, simply called original gunpowder. He held up a sample and continued, and here we have a stronger version, twice as potent, derived from the original. The king took the sample, noting its darker hue, and asked, what's different about it? General Choi explained, allow me to clarify, your majesty. As with current gunpowder, we mix the ingredients and sprinkle them with water to bind. Once dried, it's ground and sifted. Up to this point, the process is identical. He paused before adding, however, the next step differs. The sifted powder is then mixed with graphite. The king's eyes widened, recalling his earlier request to miners. So graphite was what you needed? Precisely, your majesty, General Choi confirmed. And its purpose? The king asked. The general continued, it serves several purposes. When combined with gunpowder, it prevents moisture absorption and reduces the risk of premature explosion. It also eliminates the need for sulfur. Eliminates sulfur? But without sulfur, can it still explode? The king asked in surprise. Yes, your majesty, General Choi assured. The king raised an eyebrow. Sulfur has been a staple in gunpowder for centuries. Are you sure it's safe to omit it? General Choi explained, by omitting sulfur, the gunpowder acquires a unique trait. However, it cannot be ignited with a standard fuse. The king, taken aback, asked, then how is it ignited? General Choi held up an object and replied, with this, your majesty. The king inspected the unfamiliar item as General Choi introduced it. We call it a frizzen, or a bronze firing cap, which holds the crown prince's special gunpowder. A different powder just for ignition? Isn't that overly complicated? The king asked. Rather than explain further, Your Majesty, I've prepared a demonstration, Choi Hai-san replied. Please follow me to the testing area. Upon arriving at the grounds, the king and ministers were struck by the vast size of the space. I see scarecrows in the distance. Are those the targets? The king inquired. General Choi began arranging the demonstration. Yes, Your Majesty. Let's begin. 2 soldiers armed with the new firearms stepped forward. The ministers, unfamiliar with the weapons, looked puzzled. What are those strange-looking items? They murmured. Hyung chuckled. Those are our new guns. The soldiers loaded the gunpowder and ammunition while General Choi explained each step to the king. They're using the bronze firing cap to ignite the powder, he said as the soldiers aimed. At the command, fire, the soldiers pulled the triggers. Bullets shot through the air, hitting the targets with impressive force. The power of the shot left the king and ministers speechless in awe. Remarkable power, they whispered. Even at a distance, it hasn't lost its force. Watching the display, Hyung proudly noted, sulfur can't match this. Comparing the guns to bows, he continued, though guns have limited range, this weapon overcomes that limitation with sheer power. It's the ultimate weapon. The officials, equally impressed, suggested, let's call it the armored weapon cannon. Hyung then turned to General Choi Hai-san. The name suits it well. Bring it to me. I want to examine it up close. However, General Choi hesitated. Your Highness, before that, may I present another type of explosive? Slightly puzzled, Hyung asked, Another type of explosive? What do you mean? The king asked, curiosity evident in his voice. Choi Hessen responded, Yes, Your Majesty. To the left, we have the standard gunpowder we use. Next to it is an explosive called explosive silver, which the crown prince developed for use with bronze spears. There's also cotton gunpowder, made from cotton fabric. And on the far left, we have an advanced explosive called armored gunpowder, an improvement on cotton gunpowder. Additionally, we have a special explosive oil, also created by the crown prince. The king's expression grew concerned. Explosive silver? Does it use real silver? He asked, worried about the expense. The crown prince quickly reassured him. No, Your Majesty. We used mercury. While mercury is valuable, it's more accessible than silver, and only a small amount is needed for detonation. Relieved, the king replied, Good to know, but what exactly is explosive oil? At the king's command, a servant brought forth a wooden box containing the explosive oil. As the box was opened, General Choi cautioned both the king and the crown prince to step back due to its potential danger. Slowly, he revealed the oil to the king. The king marveled at the creation. You've developed something remarkable, he praised. The crown prince, though proud, replied humbly, Father, you flatter me, but given the state of Joseon, we can't use this weapon just yet. The king, surprised, asked, Why not? The crown prince explained, This explosive is extremely sensitive to impacts during transportation. If the barrels were to collide or experience heavy vibrations, it could detonate instantly. Additionally, in the spring or summer heat, production becomes almost impossible due to the concentrated acid needed in the process, making it extremely dangerous. The king frowned. It certainly sounds like a troublesome weapon, he admitted. General Choi then added, That's why we developed armored gunpowder, which combines cotton gunpowder, explosive oil, and citrus oil in a specific ratio. The king turned to the crown prince, slightly alarmed. You're combining it with explosive oil? Didn't you just say it's difficult to use? Choi Hessen clarified. The cotton gunpowder and citrus oil neutralize the explosive oil's volatility, Your Majesty. Finally understanding, the king asked, Why call it armored gunpowder? General Choi hesitated before replying, I'm not entirely sure myself. The crown prince quickly interjected. It's thanks to Your Majesty's support that our soldiers have access to such powerful explosives. That's why it's named as a tribute. Silently, the crown prince thought to himself, I could never reveal that the name was inspired by historical methods from elsewhere. Overjoyed, the king praised the crown prince repeatedly. Your contributions are invaluable, my son. This new gun and explosive will undoubtedly become a powerful asset for Joseon. Our nation will grow stronger and more secure. The king then turned to the left minister. How will mass production proceed? The left minister responded, First, we need to determine the production costs. Your Majesty, what are the expenses? The Crown Prince replied, The cost is about 30% higher than that of standard armored gunpowder. However, by using only half the amount, we can achieve the same power. The challenge for Joseon is procuring large amounts of saltpeter and sulfur, and we need high-grade cotton fabric without fibers. The biggest obstacle, however, is that explosive oil's main ingredient is citrus oil, extracted from pig and cow fat. The king, both shocked and disheartened, said, Oh no, without a petrochemical industry, I almost wish I didn't know that such a powerful explosive could be made. Sensing his father's disappointment, the Crown Prince gently encouraged him, Father, don't give up. Abandoning our national defense would lead to ruin. The king replied, Who wouldn't understand that? But given Joseon's current situation, it's difficult to know the right way forward. The Crown Prince reminded him bluntly, Father, wasn't the whole purpose of these reforms to overcome times like these? At that moment, the Crown Prince continued, Right now, I, along with General Choi, Lord Leitran, and numerous other officials, artisans and Master Yongbei Toa, are all striving to find solutions. Surviving this hardship is a challenge, but giving up means certain failure. The king, hearing these words, felt his determination renewed. Smiling, he said, You're absolutely right. From the day I took the throne, I vowed to give my all for Joseon's prosperity. Addressing his officials, he declared, My loyal subjects, focus your minds and dedicate yourselves to the success of our reforms. Deeply moved by his words, the officials responded in unison, We pledge to give our utmost efforts. The king replied, Good, we stand united. Years later, the officials would often sigh and say, If only we hadn't inspected Area 51 that day, we wouldn't be so overwhelmed now. Talanjiai Hoang Hai would laugh and slap his mouth, joking, I really brought this upon us. Truly, disaster comes from one's own words. Returning to the events at Area 51, before leaving, King Chung and Ion, unable to hide his satisfaction, turned to the Crown Prince and said, This is truly remarkable. I'll spare no resources to support this endeavor. Find a way to mass-produce the gunpowder. I want to see all of Joseon's soldiers equipped with these state-of-the-art weapons soon. The Crown Prince smiled and replied, I obey your command. But as the king glanced at the artisans' pale faces and weary bodies, he couldn't help but feel concerned. All of this is due to their dedication and sacrifice, he thought. Then he turned to General Choi and asked, Explain how the musket was completed. With a tear nearly escaping in pride, General Choi joyfully responded, Yes, Your Majesty. Crafting a musket with rifling required custom-made tools. The Crown Prince recounted how two artisans had nervously discussed the task, asking, The Crown Prince wants a rifling rod made. Should we use the old anvil? And how, soon after, they received the necessary materials, ready to fulfill their orders. The artisans worked tirelessly, following each precise instruction given by the Crown Prince. After filling the gaps, make sure to file it smooth and check the frame carefully, he had reminded them, and with unity, they replied, Yes, we understand. The Crown Prince remained vigilant, urging, Hurry and get it perfect. Through their hard work, they completed 5 prototype muskets. Hyung praised their efforts, saying, These are true masterpieces, born of blood and sweat. At Area 51, the Crown Prince stood, observing silently with a determined gaze. Everyone there knew that today's trials weren't just gun tests. They were steps that could decide Joseon's future. The Crown Prince's calm yet commanding voice cut through the heavy atmosphere. Let's begin testing its actual performance. First, let's see if it can withstand the gunpowder. Yes, Your Highness, they replied. The Crown Prince suggested, The old musket used 1 hectogram of powder. Let's start with half that amount. Everyone nodded in agreement, knowing the importance of each step. General Choi Hai-san gave a firm command, Fire! 2 bullets shot from the barrel, cutting through the air. All eyes followed the trajectory. The Crown Prince, unable to hide his anticipation, quickly asked, What's the result? General Choi, pleased and slightly tense, reported, Half a hectogram of armored gunpowder along with half of the secondary powder performed well. Given the musket's purpose, increasing to 2 hectograms seems unnecessary. Satisfied, the Crown Prince responded, "Good, now let's reduce the amount to find the ideal charge. Let's use 40 paces as our standard range." "Yes, Your Highness," they replied. Under the Crown Prince's direction, more musket tests were conducted, with each step advancing Joseon's strength and future possibilities. Leitren's eyes lit up with excitement as he realized the results. The bullet hit the target at 40 paces. With this power, it might even reach targets farther out. The Crown Prince nodded, a quiet satisfaction in his eyes. "Indeed," he replied calmly. Leitren, energized, proposed, "Then let's test it at 50 paces this time. This is thrilling." On command, 2 bullets shot through the air with a powerful crack, sending a faint layer of smoke drifting through the air, a testament to the musket's potential. Li Jun, unable to contain his excitement, called out, "Your Highness." The secondary gunpowder pushed the bullet to pierce the target at 70 paces. "It's incredible," but just as quickly, his tone shifted, concern clouding his face. "However, this is only a partial success." The sudden change drew a curious frown from the Crown Prince. "What do you mean?" he asked. Li Jun continued, "We've fired over 20 shots, but they're inconsistent, none hit precisely. The bullet's trajectory seems unstable, affecting accuracy." The Crown Prince nodded thoughtfully. "Sharp observation. As I thought, it's time to introduce them to something else." Breaking his contemplation, the Crown Prince asked aloud, "Is that the only problem? Cleaning and reloading seem to take a long time. Why not try firing without those steps?" Li Jun, taken aback, asked, "But Your Highness, if we skip those, wouldn't the bullets just fall out?" "Not if we make the bullets fit the barrel snugly. Try it," the Crown Prince directed. "Yes, Your Highness," General Choi replied, though he couldn't hide a small hint of frustration. "We already know the answer, so why ask?" he thought. Observing their puzzled faces, the Crown Prince simply smiled to himself, thinking, "Letting them work this out will teach them better than any explanation. Let them experience what I learned from Extubital, build their skills and their confidence." After some time spent implementing the Crown Prince's suggestions, General Choi returned with a report. "We tried it, Your Highness, but the gunpowder residue is clogging up the barrel, making the next shot impossible." The Crown Prince considered this. "It seems cleaning is unavoidable, then. General Choi, think about it. On a battlefield, will there be time to clean the barrel with the enemy charging?" Caught off guard, General Choi hesitated, admitting, "You're right, Your Highness." Embarrassment flashed across his face, while beside him, Li Jun scratched his head in thought, muttering, "Then what do we do?" The Crown Prince observed, feeling mildly disappointed. "Must I guide them again?" But before he could speak, General Choi had a sudden inspiration. "What if we carve grooves in the barrel?" he exclaimed. "Grooves?" Li Jun looked at him wide-eyed. "Yes." General Choi pointed to a nearby stream. "The water flows along the grooves, channeling its path. Gunpowder's flames could flow the same way. If we carved grooves in the barrel, the residue might exit along with the flame." Li Jun's eyes brightened. "It's worth a try." The Crown Prince, pleased by this insight, thought, "Looks like I don't need to step in after all." However, as they were setting up, a craftsman approached with a worried look. "General Choi, how will we carve these grooves?" The question struck them like a splash of cold water, dampening their excitement. General Choi muttered, "Back to square one." The Crown Prince chuckled, knowing their work was far from over. Progress is a journey. Each step forward is still a success. Undeterred, the artisans spent long nights brainstorming. Finally, they developed a tool for carving grooves, fashioning muskets with various configurations from 3 to 15 grooves. Yet, in their next round of tests, General Choi and Jang Ion encountered a new challenge. Li John sighed, speaking to the other officials. "So, in the end, cleaning is still an issue?" Another official asked. "What exactly were the results?" Li John hesitated, then explained, "Each number of grooves has its trade-offs. 6 or fewer grooves keep the power but leave a lot of residue. With 9 or more, there's less residue, but power drops." He sighed again. "So what's the answer? 9 grooves? But we lose power. 6? Then we have the residue problem." The Crown Prince, listening nearby, wondered, will they find the solution this time? Suddenly, Jong Yongaseo spoke up. What if we spiral the grooves? His words caught everyone's attention, including the Crown Prince, who smiled with approval. Explain, the Crown Prince prompted. Yes, Your Highness, Jong Yongaseo replied. If we make the groove spiral, the length inside the barrel increases. With 6 grooves, that extra length would give the residue room to escape. And because the grooves are spiraled, the gunpowder's explosive force wouldn't be wasted. The officials, suddenly realizing, cheered. That's it. Spiraling might be the answer. The Crown Prince immediately ordered. Then let's test it. After multiple tests, they found an optimal design A musket with 6 spiraled grooves, turning 1.5 times down the barrel. A voice called out, the musket is ready for full testing. Lee John eagerly directed, record and categorize every result. Seeing their enthusiasm, the Crown Prince felt immense satisfaction. They've come far. With the right guidance, these minds could achieve anything. Smiling, he thought, grow quickly, my craftsman. Soon you'll master this art. In that moment, both Lee John and Yun Aeon Su felt a sudden chill, shivering slightly. Why does it feel eerie all of a sudden? They murmured, sensing the Crown Prince's silent ambition. Thanks for watching, guys. Comment Flamingo and subscribe for the next part.